Jimmy.
Yes.
Richard. Welcome to the iTunes chat about The Hobbit. I just thought I'd start off by asking you, you've been shooting the film for about 2 years now, since principal photography started. The movie's opened, it's now coming out on DVD. When you went into this project, what were your expectations, and how have the results of the last 2 years varied from those expectations?
Well, I set the bar very low because we're
continue to do so.
playing dwarves. So, yeah, I mean, it's you go into it having seen Lord of the Rings and the success of that, and what Pete did with those films, and you go in with a lot of faith and spent 18 months having a bit of a crack, really, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea because I wasn't a Tolkien fan as a kid. I mean, I didn't. The Hobbit wasn't introduced to me. I come from a family of educators, but The Hobbit didn't play a part in my life. Lord of the Rings didn't actually play a huge part in my life. I mean, I heard you were in it, and I thought, no, I don't fancy that. And so I kind of went in quite naive, and also because, of course, when we met Peter, there was no script. It was an act of faith for him as a director, but it also was quite an act of faith for us to kind of like take that jump. I mean, because it's a long jump and a significant jump because you're moving with your family to the other side of the world. But since the movie has come out, and since all that hype has disappeared from the cinema release, which was kind of frightening and hard not to be caught up in, what is fantastic on a daily basis is that kids are coming up to me wherever I am and talking about The Hobbit.
Can I just ask you about your characters and how you approached your characters?
I think it was interesting because I didn't really know. I mean, and you know, in the book, I mean, Thorin is quite separate from the rest of us, kind of in the book, because I mean he speaks. He kind of is defined. I mean, I think what's fascinating about Pete and Fran, his life partner and his creative partner, is that the challenge they were faced was to try and create 13 individuals, 13 different characters, 13 different looks. I think the way they did that was to match their imagination with the actors that they had cast. They wanted us all to bring a bit of ourselves, you know. So the process was difficult at times, but also it was a pleasure to be able to bring bits. He's very collaborative, Pete, you know. But on a daily basis, we didn't often know what we were doing, but I think you could say the same thing about Pete. On a daily basis, he wasn't quite sure what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I did know the book from being a kid. I read it when I was 7, and I was on stage in a production when I was 13. So I was, in Birmingham. Alex.
What did you play?
I was an elf.
Oh.
I was kind of tall and
good
lanky at the time. So yeah, I mean, I'd kind of grown up with the characters, but at the time I was more interested in Bilbo, and going back to it as an adult, focusing on Thorin was interesting because he's got a complicated psychology, and you know, I did go into other Tolkien works to see how that character evolved in his mind as a writer, and so there was a big body of work to look at. But as Jimmy said, you know, it becomes collaborative, and I really feel with Pete, Fran and Philippa that they hear their actors' voices and they start to write for them, and it evolves in a really brilliant way. And I remember that the scenes that we were doing in Bag End when Bofa has all that great stuff about the fire-breathing dragon and the teeth-like razors, and I remember there was a moment where it was about to be lost, when you totally sold it to them that it should remain, and it's one of those moments that you kind of remember in Bag End. And I think in terms of telling that long story, all of the investment that happened in Bag End is really going to pay off when it comes to the third film.
I think that's right.
Do you think, as a group, as the Dwarves, can you just explain, kind of try and explain to the iTunes audience what it was like on a day-to-day sort of level in terms of the dynamic of the group as actors and as characters? I mean, because what I think they maybe not appreciate is you probably never saw each other day in, day out as yourselves.
No,
once you got the prosthetics on.
I think that's a really good question, and we were surprised to catch sight of each other out of prosthetic. I mean, we recognised each other as dwarves more than we recognised each other as individuals and as actors. But I think the dynamic, the journey, you know, I mean, the Hobbit's call it, the first part is an unexpected journey, and it was an unexpected journey for all of us. And the marriage between 13 actors getting together to play 13 dwarves, both those identities going on this journey together, it was very important that we bonded, and we did bond hugely. And you know, occasionally, of course, like a family or a brotherhood, there were fallings out. There were at times we needed to be separated, but we were always brought back together. Not just by the call shoot, we were brought back together by the country, the journey, by New Zealand, by Middle Earth, and by our conscious and subconscious need to be kind of knit together. You know, and there was Richard leading us. You know, and so it's, if I think about it in those terms, it's actually quite moving to me in a sense. You know. It's
interesting how because of the, you know, what we were going through in terms of prosthetics and weight of costume, it became like a battle for survival. And I remember everyone checking out each other's call times because that extra 10 minutes in bed meant so much. And I think because we all knew what each other was going through, there was a real camaraderie.
Yeah.
Peter is an incredibly, in my mind, an incredibly inclusive filmmaker in all respects, whether it be making it behind the scenes constantly to share with an audience and really show process, whether it's including the actors in a collaborative way in decision making about character. And I just wondered if you just Pete as a person and the energy that he brings to set every day, the normality of him as a human being with this kind of amount of responsibility on his shoulders.
I mean, I think there's a complicated notion about that, though, because he is incredibly inclusive, he's incredibly collaborative. He is the fan, the biggest fan that got to make the movie, you know. Yet, I'm a 48-year-old man who was on a daily basis still quite in awe of him. You know, I mean, it's because he is incredibly inclusive, but you can't help but want to please him and want to kind of win his admiration. And I think that's a nice thing about him, but it is... He's a complicated soul, I think, because I mean he is this down-to-earth, hobbity, Tolkien-esque kind of thrown together person, but who looks at it with a kid's eyes and a kid's wonder, but he's still in charge.